close the executive session and reconvene the public meeting.
Well, I can't hear very well there.
I'm sorry. We are now closing the executive session and reconvening the public meeting for Tuesday, July 10th, 2018. I want to reiterate that no action was taken by the Commission during our executive session, and we will now open the public meeting to the Port of Bellingham. And I will make a roll call. Commissioner Briscoe.
Here.
Commissioner Shepard. Here. And Commissioner Bell is here. And this is the portion of our meeting that we open up to public comment. If anybody has anything they wish to say about anything on the agenda or not on the agenda, if you just want to yell at us, that'd be fine. If you haven't signed up, you can still speak. We allocate about 3 minutes to that speech, and we try to hold it to 30 minutes. So anybody wishing to speak? Anybody signed up?
We don't have anyone signed up, but we
Anybody
have
wishing to speak?
a hand.
And just identify yourself and for the record, thanks.
Pete Granger, President of Whatcom Working Waterfronts Coalition. In addition to supporting your number 8 in action approval, renewal, and modification lease between the Port and Walsh Marine, I just remembered that we lost one of our prominent fishermen this week, Wally Green, longtime supporter of the port, longtime supporter of the industry, longtime fisherman. So, and I don't know if Bobby heard that. So,
Yes, I did, Pete. Unfortunately, a couple days ago.
Thank you for that. Anyone else wishing to speak? All right.
I'd kind of like to, before we start here, just for a second.
Sure.
We've had our 4th of July festivities, and I'd like to thank staff for the excellent job they did this year. We've had numerous people comment on how well the event went off, and everything was great. And I just really like to thank staff for the excellent job they did. And I'd also like to speak, Eric Tritz has filled in for Dave Warder, and it's a time when we had a terrible mess with the water pipeline breaking, and we had folks trying to move that large riprap rock in, and staff and he have done an excellent job of rerouting traffic to get that rock in there so that barge can get out of here on time. And that puts a message out to the people up and down this coast, the Port of Bellingham can get the job done when we need to get it done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Those nice comments.
Okay, with that, we're going to move to the consent agenda. Commissioner Briscoe, do you have anything?
No, I spoke with staff today on some of the questions I had, and they were answered fine. I have no further questions on any of the items on the consent agenda.
Mr. Shepard?
I've got questions on M, O, and P.
MOP, for those of you.
So on M, we're going to suggest that I think Commissioner Bell has a concern on M as well. So can we pull that from the consent agenda? And then on O, maybe we can try and answer Commissioner Shepard's concerns and leave it on the consent agenda?
Yeah, it's just a minor one about the age of the building. This is for the the exterior ceiling and masonry. Have we done this before on this particular property, and is this a expected treatment for given the age of this property?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Gibson, project engineer. The Commissioner's question was about the Bayview building, I believe. And if real estate can confirm, we purchased that building in about 2003. Is that right, Judy? 2013. And so I don't know that we have records on when a previous sealing effort was done or if it was ever done. I don't believe it was.
And what's the age? Is that the age of the building?
It was built in 2003, I believe. 1999.
Okay.
And I will speak to this a little bit, knowing the condition of that building. When it rains and it comes in horizontal, it rains inside the building. So this grouting is very necessary for these buildings. This is not a question for me.
Great. Okay.
So I had a couple of things.
I have one for P first. Do you have something on?
No go.
Oh. For P, this is for Sunil. I see from the bid that the one we're selecting has the LED lighting is about $20,000 cheaper than the others. What's the explanation for the significant drop in price there? Are we going to be sacrificing quality or longevity?
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to have Emily Philippi, our airfield operations supervisor, address the question. She led this effort.
Good evening, Commissioners. Emily Philippi, our site supervisor. Yes, we were very surprised as well to see the one bid come in, significantly lower, which we were actually very surprised and happy about. The quality of it, we are not going to be sacrificing anything with that. All three of those companies that are a bid are approved by the FAA, and it's been a product that's been used at many other airports, and they haven't had any issues. And we were anticipating around 40,000, so it's not too far off from what we estimated at.
Great. Okay. Thank you for that information.
Yes.
And for me, I have a potential conflict of interest on MN, and I believe I should probably pull O for the same reason.
I didn't realize O was the Bayview building, so yes.
Yeah, so MN and O, I'm just going to pull for my consideration, and I'll allow you two to vote on that separately. And then just a couple of things that I wanted to address. First of all, on F, I learned something about how the environmental thing works, and F is an interlocal agreement with the Port of Tacoma for environmental work, and it became clear to me that how complex this gets and how we actually have somebody embedded from the Department of Ecology in the Tacoma Port to help us with that, and that was enlightening. So thanks. And then on G, it wasn't clear to me if we'd save any money by completing that project early. And I asked Brian if he would help us tell us exactly how much we were going to save when it came down to spending this little bit of money. And if he would indulge me in that, it helps sell this tremendously.
Thank you, Commissioners. Brian Gowan, Director of Environmental Programs. Actually, I'm going to actually turn this over to Kurt Baumgarten, as he also has been leading the effort on this one. So I'll let him address those questions for you. And if anything specific for me, I'm available as well.
Kurt Baumgarten, Port Environmental Planner. I don't know that I can tell you exactly how much money it will save. I can tell you that the way the proposal and the scope's written is that at this point we would be able to look at a couple different options, which could include closing out the mitigation possibly 2 years earlier. We've gotten indications from the regulators that may be possible, but without going through a more formal process, we can't really explore that. Right now, we are, by the permitting, obligated to do the entire phase 2 permitting, or excuse me, phase 2 of the mitigation, which from airport staff, the indication is we don't want to do that. So we have to do something moving forward. And so this amendment is to tee that up and make sure that in doing that, we're as efficient as possible with the port money. So.
Yeah, and the only reason I pulled this out is just to let everybody know how on top of this environmental work our staff is and how amazing you guys are. So thank you for being on top of something as important as this. So that's
Great.
all.
Thank you.
With that, there's no other things. If we can just pull MN and O from the consent agenda.
So Frank, can you give us a few comments?
Commissioner, the relevant statute for conflicts is called the Ethics in Municipal Government Act, RCW 4223. And it states that you cannot be beneficially interested directly or indirectly in any contract made by or through or under your office. As a tenant of the port, and be clear, in this building you have a long-term lease that predates your election as a commissioner. You're not beneficially interested directly or indirectly in the contract. That is the repair contracts. So as a matter of law, you could vote on this. Now, I'm not telling you whether as a public perception issue or political issue, you should vote on this. I just want to be clear on the record that you don't have a conflict as the conflict is set forth in the statute. So the rest is your decision as an elected public official.
Thank you for that. First of all, I'm not a new commissioner, I'm an old commissioner, I just happen to be new to the job. Secondly, I do think that just because it is close enough that I am going to recuse myself from this vote, so the rest of the consent agenda, can we move forward with those?
All right, I'd like to make a motion to approve consent agenda items A through P with the exception of M, N, and O to be addressed separately for a separate vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hello, Sitka.
Oh, did we lose you, Bobby?
No, I'm here. Aye.
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 And now the second motion.
All right, so we're going to start with item M.
You can do M, N, and O all together.
Altogether, yeah. Same conflict.
Okay.
Understand it's because I'm a tenant of the building and all of these repairs are being made to the building that I'm currently a lessor in. I'm also the guy who gets wet when it rains. Just saying.
So,
Okay, the first motion being authorize the executive director to execute. Do you want me to read them
you can,
individually?
no. Just the consent agendas M, N, and O would be sufficient.
All right, so let's make a motion to approve consent agenda items M, N, and O.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I abstain. Thank you for indulging me with that. Clears my conscience.
I mean, you gonna get a nap tonight or what?
Well, I'm old. I'm
Well, you're gonna get in the, that'll be in the rocking chair then, right?
a new old commissioner. Okay, we'll move on to the action items. Action item number 1.
A motion to approve the executive director to enter into a service contract between West Coast Terminal and Stevedore Company Incorporated and the Port of Bellingham for services at the Bellingham Shipping Terminal.
Thank you, Diane. Good evening, Commissioners. Chris Clark, Marine Terminal Business Development Manager. We are pleased that West Coast Terminal and Stevedore Company Incorporated, the Washington State Division of Ports America, has recognized our port's efforts to revitalize the Bellingham Shipping Terminal and create a base of steady and dependable users and customers. Ports America is a large terminal and stevedoring company with operations throughout the USA. In our state, they are active in Tacoma and Vancouver, Washington, where they specialize in unloading Far East origin break bulk cargoes such as steel products and pipes. Ports America has a very close relationship and long-term contacts with several international shipping lines and ship owners. In this area, they are the exclusive stevedore for Saga Welco, a major break bulk carrier with a fleet of 54 vessels. When the representatives of Ports America, who are in the audience today, gentlemen over there, first visited the Bellingham Shipping Terminal in March of this year, they were accompanied by the regional Saga Welco representative. Both were impressed with the facilities as well as a very positive attitude of Local 7 of the ILWU, who's also in the audience today, Joe. Ports America would like to act on that positive momentum and work with our port and the ILWU in increasing utilization of the Bellingham Shipping Terminal by bringing in Saga Welco as a base carrier. They are willing to commit manpower and supplement the port's equipment with their own. In exchange for this commitment, Ports America is requesting that the Port of Bellingham grant them a service contract with exclusive rights to unload and load a variety of commodities at the Bellingham Shipping Terminal for a period of 5 years with 2 5-year mutually agreeable extension options. For the most part, these commodities would originate in Japan, South Korea, China, and Taiwan and be trucked to their final destination across the border after landing in Bellingham. As a result of this proposal, we are requesting the Commissioners authorize the Executive Director to enter into a service contract with Ports America, which will be submitted to commissioners at a future meeting for review and approval. I'd like to point out, in fairness, that we have asked other stevedore providers for their proposals to unload steel products, including commitments on bringing supplementary equipment to Bellingham. However, none of them have expressed any interest in doing so. We view this as an excellent opportunity to work with a willing partner who have the foresight to realize that the future of the Bellingham shipping terminal is at hand and are willing to make a long-term commitment to it. So can I assist in answering any questions?
Commissioner Shepard?
Yeah. Chris, nice job on this. I know there's been a lot of work that's gone into this. My questions are about the exclusivity of the contract. Is the exclusivity only for that set list of items, or is it broader?
Well, they've requested exclusivity for several commodities: steel products, pipes, project cargo, oversized cargo, and bulk cargo. That's their request.
Okay. And how common is that exclusive contract with other ports our size?
It varies. Some ports, it kind of depends upon the situation. Ports our size, probably essentially maybe 50% would have such agreements, and others don't. We're kind of unique in that we, of course, as you know, are in the process of renewing our port, and we still have limited resources as far as equipment is concerned. So in order to reach that next stage, either we're going to have to expend more funds on equipment or have a partner like Ports America who's willing to do that themselves.
And for the local union, is this a type of agreement that you guys have worked with favorably in the past? And are you confident in the working relationship here?
Joe Schmidt, Local 7. I believe it's going to be a good marketing tool. It'll help broaden, take us to the next step. I've worked since we lost work. I've traveled extensively the last 17 years, and I've worked with Ports of America and other ports, and I have nothing but good to say about them. They've been a good company, and I think they'll be good for Bellingham.
Well, I think it's goes without saying that 17 years was a long time without active shipments occurring at the port, and so appreciate that. Okay, go ahead.
Commissioner Briscoe?
Yeah, no, my question was of the same nature for Joe. And he and Darren were on board with this, and this is what they'd like to see. It's very important that we stay on track with Local 7. And if what I confirm what I just heard, Joe, is that you guys are good to go with this. You think it'd be good for the shipping terminal?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you, Joe. And Chris, thank you for the job you're doing. You're doing one heck of a job there, and keep up the good work. And welcome, Ports America.
Thank you, Commissioner.
And mine are pretty simple. First of all, I'd like to meet the gentleman from Ports of America. If we're going to get married to you, we might as well get introduced. So can you guys introduce yourselves and let us know who you are and what you do?
Yeah. You can use the microphone there.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Bart Goodhard. I've worked with Ports America for 5 years. I manage sales and business development for break bulk, project cargo, and military cargo. Thanks for having us up. Appreciate it.
Where are you out of?
I live in Seattle.
Seattle?
Yeah.
And who's come on.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing us to be here. My name is Greg Unnebrink. I'm Vice President of Ports America and the PNW, in charge of all the operations and business development based out of Tacoma. And we're very excited to be here, and we're looking forward to this marriage.
And so my comment is pretty easy. We're giving you exclusivity for a period of 5 years. Personally, I would have liked to have seen 3 years just to test the market, but I don't mind the 5 year. I do want to know how you're going to help promote our area as opposed to Baton Rouge or some of the other areas that you're located, Southern California. That's a huge issue for us. And I will say, first and foremost, you're working with probably the best labor union north of California.
So before you answer that, I just want to interject that we have not agreed, or that you're not approving a 5-year contract, and you're not approving all the commodities that were listed here. There's some of the commodities listed are, I got to find my place here, barge of steel pipe, which I have no problem with, project cargoes, oversized cargoes, and bulk cargoes are things we're going to need to negotiate. So the time period here and those other things I just mentioned still need to be negotiated.
Okay. Well, I look forward to it and would love to have this as a partnership, so. That being said, I'll call the question.
Okay,
You
yeah,
can
sure.
sit down.
Okay.
Can we?
Because the first couple on that list are fairly specific, but the last three are quite broad.
Project cargoes how do you define that, first of all?
Bulk cargo.
Right, bulk cargo, same thing. The steel and the pipe are great, but I think the other ones we have to work through. So you're authorizing me to start these negotiations and enter into a contract with them, and that could be from 3 to 5 years. So now that I have your comments, I'll know how to negotiate.
Motion to authorize the executive director to enter into a service contract between West Coast Terminal and Stevedore Company Incorporated and the Port of Bellingham for services at the Bellingham Shipping Terminal.
Commissioner Briscoe?
Aye.
Mr. Shepard?
Aye.
Commissioner Bell is an aye as well. Good luck.
Yeah.
Okay, action item number 2.
A motion authorizing the executive director to execute a personal services agreement with DH Environmental Incorporated in the amount of $44,998.30 for consultant services for the port's Environmental Compliance Assessment Program, or ECAP, until December 31, 2018.
Hello, everyone, and commissioners. My name is Adrienne Hedgedis. I am an environmental specialist with the Port of Bellingham. I wanted to give you a presentation today on the ECAP, or Environmental Compliance Assessment Program, because it has been around for 25 years, but it's been a little bit dormant lately, so we wanted to give you some information on it. The ECAP started in 1992 at the Port of Bellingham and has also been implemented at other ports in the state, including Port of Seattle and Port of Everett. The ECAP ensures that tenants manage their leased properties in compliance with environmental regulations in accordance with our lease language. We have hundreds of tenants, some of which perform short-term activities that could potentially leave the port liable for pollution or damage. The ECAP performs periodic site visits to tenants and the Port of Bellingham operations as well to review environmental requirements and best practices. We work with the port's real estate division and other appropriate staff to ensure that everyone is kept in the loop. The primary objective of the ECAP is to ensure that port tenants manage lease properties without harming port assets or the environment. Other specific benefits associated with the ECAP are improved overall environmental and stormwater management, improved relationships with tenants through face-to-face meetings, environmental outreach, regulatory and best practice support, and referrals for technical assistance. Site visits give us first-hand opportunities to discover potential negative impacts to port assets or the environment, as well as the good practices. We have some tenants that are doing some amazing things, and it's really nice to be able to get out there and go through those with them. Site visits occur every couple of years at the most to any given tenant, unless there are special circumstances. The program is not intended to shift the tenant's responsibility for compliance with environmental laws or regulations to the port. The ECAP promotes best management practices, or BMPs, to assist in pollution prevention and illicit discharges, and supports the compliance of the Phase 2 municipal stormwater permit through outreach and education efforts. Prior to 2015, site visits were performed with a team of consultants on tenants performing all activities with a focus on those that were subject to environmental regulations. That means some visits were still performed to offices and others with minimal environmental risk. such as coffee makers and printers. In 2016, the port worked with another consultant to determine a more efficient way to look at the tenant site visits. A 16-factor risk ranking was developed, and that was in order to quantify the likelihood and severity of the risk of pollution. That risk ranking will help us focus our efforts on tenants that have a higher risk. Due to staffing levels, no site visits were performed to tenants in the last half of 2015, any of 2016 or 17, although we did complete one round of site visits to our own internal operations in 2016 and one round earlier this year in 2018. The next steps are to complete a risk ranking, complete the ECAP database of tenants and site visit recommendations, improve our site mapping and georeferencing of potential environmental issues, improve our record keeping, and increase efficiencies. So consultant assistance is needed to perform one round of site visits before the end of 2018. They will be providing technical supports to us and to our tenants during site visits and otherwise. We need them to help us complete our tenant database and complete the risk ranking matrix of the tenants. And that risk ranking tenant or matrix will establish the frequency of site visits needed for tenants at each level of risk, and so that we can forecast that site visit schedule for the next 5 years. This will ensure that all tenants and port operations are visited appropriately and enable us to track our performance and better evaluate the ECAP program effectiveness. We need the consultants to help us update our site maps and prepare for future site visits, and also to perform permit-required outreach for stormwater management. In May 2018, the port determined through the RFPS process that DH Environmental Inc. out of Seattle was the most qualified consultant. They have very strong stormwater and hazardous waste experience and technical experience, as well as ECAP experience with the Port of Seattle. We do anticipate annual amendments subject to budget and commission approval. Staff recommends approval of the PSA. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Oh, sorry, thank you. It seems that this is not a required procedure because only some ports do it and it's an elective process for us.
The ECAP, yes.
The ECAP program, okay. But there are some requirements for reporting for these for the permit we hold.
The stormwater permit that we have, that Phase 2 stormwater permit, requires that we communicate stormwater in general. And so we use this program as a way to get the information out to all of our tenants.
So for ports that are not having a program like this, they're having their staff manage that process, and it's something that they're saying they're doing, but it's maybe not as formalized as we have.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have any metrics on the success of the program? What it's achieved? What it could do better?
I think more informally, because if we looked at some of the recommendations that were made by the program in 1992 versus the recommendations that were made by the program in 2015, you'll find a across-the-board cleanup by everyone. I think it has definitely helped. But as far as metrics themselves, those were not formally kept, unless Alan has some other comment. No.
I think that could be useful for us to find a way of getting some tracking on, so that we're able to show, we have a program in place and we're taking some leadership. It seems, especially from back in 1992, to put a program like this in place. And it would be useful if we were able to also show it's done this.
Yeah.
And it could do this if it was, had more time or whatever.
Yeah, and the database that we're developing right now will definitely help with that.
Okay. That's all my questions.
Commissioner Briscoe?
No questions.
So I have a couple, as you know. First of all, the thing that struck me was it wasn't very specific in the beginning. As I read through this, it was pretty generic, and it was a time and material type contract. So I fear those things running amok. But then I spent some time with Brian, and he explained how you release the funds for this. So would you do me a favor and go through that, just for public knowledge?
Okay, I think it comes down to managing the scope of work and ensuring that the consultant is doing that work as directed by myself.
And you direct that work,
I will be
correct?
the project manager on this.
So they don't get a green light until you tell them, and they're not spending it based on what they think. You're directing them specifically as to where they're going to go to do their inspection.
Yes, yes, I will be project managing it.
And you haven't identified 125, that's just an estimate.
So we've identified approximately 125 that have some potential environmental impact. So that is the number of non-office or non-licensed to operate tenants that we have.
Okay. And then when you add a new tenant, so let's say we bring a new tenant in, is there a criteria established for putting them into that database so that we have that kind of monitoring?
Yeah, so we have regular updates from real estate. So the information initially goes to real estate and then comes to me. We'll be updating the database with that information and then going through the risk ranking process with them to figure out where they are on the matrix.
I think not that I'm going to be here for this, but I prefer to see these kind of things done in-house. I love the fact that we're doing this. I think the best inspections are done closest to home. I know that I get inspected annually in my Class A office space for hazardous waste activity just because it's in my name, right? And they have no idea, but you guys do. But I have to entertain inspectors, so I'm very aware of what this is. But again, narrowing the scope to the point where maybe we can do this in-house and augmenting the staff somewhere either in real estate or in environmental. I would like to see that down the road. I think they could set up the metric to do that, but these inspections won't be very, I would imagine a year from now, intensive. Is that correct? Once you figured out who's there and what they have, and we've got a good system for incorporating new customers, it should be a maintenance.
Yeah, it can be once we're familiar with the site, and I am new to the port within the last year, and so I'm getting familiar with. Yay! So we're getting familiar with each other, and I think it's also looking at how they're training their new staff and how their best management practices are being maintained, and how they're kind of working with whatever regulations they need to be working with. So there is sort of an upkeep to it, and as I mentioned, that the most frequently that somebody would be visited is every couple of years, so that we're not in their face too much. We want to be sensitive to that. And as far as your comment about in-house, we definitely we've got great expertise in-house, but unfortunately that we tried that with our round of visits earlier this year, but it pulled resources away from our other programs too much. So
I understand. If we're going to allocate resources somewhere, why not incorporate them in-house? And the only other concern I would have is that as somebody who gets inspected a lot, that we wouldn't be viewed as another regulator. Right. That your approach is incredibly important in how you approach that. With that, I'm done.
Yeah, I think the comment about doing work in-house whenever possible is quite valid. We get a lot of requests for consulting work, and I think all municipalities do, and we rely on those frequently. And there's got to be break-even points when it makes sense to have that staffing person here with a full-time contract that retains that institutional knowledge and gives us the best possible product for our investment, as opposed to hiring temporary contractors. So that's
the comment I might add to all that is that it is good to do it in-house, but sometimes it's also good to have an outside perspective, someone on the outside looking in at what's going on.
Fair enough. Any more questions?
I have none.
Okay. Diane?
A motion authorizing the executive director to execute a personal services agreement with DH Environmental Incorporated in the amount of $44,998.30 for consultant services for the Port's Environmental Compliance Assessment Program, or ECAP, until December 31, 2018.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 thank you.
For the record, Best Recycling does not do any recycling at 12.
Sounds like you got a dirty office, though, if you're getting inspected.
Sorry, he just called that Class A office space, so I think Shirley might need to raise his rent.
Me and my big mouth. All right, action item number 3.
A motion to authorize the executive director to enter into an insurance contract and authorize payment for the renewal of the port's property and crime insurance coverage for the period from July 1, 2018 through July 1, 2019.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Tamara Sobjak, Director of Finance. I just wanted to briefly explain the reason for the 12% increase. We don't normally see double digits in our insurance policies. But before I get started, what do hospital gowns and insurance policies have in common?
They both got you covered.
You're never covered as much as you think you are. Very close, thank you.
That came to me about the time you were saying that. I was thinking, oh yeah, there's that slide slot in the back.
Yeah, okay. So there are a few factors that, that drive the increase. The first one is our property values. So this accounts for about a third of the increase. The chart here shows...
I want to know what came to my mind.
I can't even look at you right now. Commissioner Briscoe, you can't see this.
I can too. I got video going.
Okay. We need to get back on track.
It's only about 3 seconds behind, so I'll get to laugh at it later.
All right, so the chart in front of us shows the correlation between the insured value and the premium and rate, and it just shows that correlation in a visual way. Another factor is the loss records for our group. The port purchases insurance with a group of other Pacific Northwest ports. There are 8 of us, and while there were no large losses in 2017, insurance companies also look at the potential for losses. So the big earthquake, the big flood, it's not if but when, and they take that into consideration when they give us our rates. And then finally, the property insurance losses. So as insurance companies have large losses, they do have to recover them somehow through premiums. And this chart just shows the columns where they had the big loss years. And 2017 was the worst lost year in history for insurance companies. So recall, basically the entire state of California was on fire. We had 3 major hurricanes hit the U.S. And so in 2017, they're estimating $125 billion in insurance claims. So we're going to see those increases. And that factor was the majority of our increase, about 8%. So I just wanted to briefly explain the cause of that. Our policy
so we live where that doesn't happen, and we take care of things and behave ourselves, and we get penalized for it. Interesting.
Right, but if a big earthquake or flood were to happen, everybody else would pay for us too. So give and take. Yeah. So our policy did expire June 30th, but we are in a grace period, and staff is requesting approval for the renewal of our policies today. Got any other questions?
Can we shop for better insurance or not?
Can we shop for better insurance?
Our broker does
maybe
that.
I should better rate.
I didn't hear what he said.
Yeah, he did ask if we could shop for a better insurance rate. But yeah, Commissioner, our broker does that for us. They take it out to different markets. Our insurance is pretty complicated, as you can imagine. There's a lot of different pieces to it. But they do take that out to both. Sometimes they hard bid it and sometimes they soft bid it, meaning they just call around to different carriers and see if there's interest. And sometimes they openly market it. And we're combined with 7 other ports.
7 others, yep.
Yeah, so the pretty good marketing power right there. But yeah, our broker does that every year.
Okay, just want to make that clear so people in the audience or people that are watching or people that look at this later understand we do look around.
A motion to authorize the executive director to enter into an insurance contract and authorize payment for the renewal of the port's property and crime insurance coverage for the period July 1, 2018 through July 1, 2019.
Aye.
Thank you.
Action item number 4.
There we go.
Sorry.
A motion to authorize the executive director to enter into an agreement with event organizer Sherry Ann Trammell for the exclusive use of the Zwanich Point Park for a private event to be held on one day only, Saturday, September 1, 2018.
So Commissioners, we've talked about this one a couple times now. Ms. Trammell has come back to us. She was here at the testifying at the last meeting in the public comment period that she would like exclusive use of the park as well. You'll recall we granted that to Mr. Dixon for an event in August. Ms. Trammell's event is on September 1st. We give basically the similar terms to what we did for Dixon. We would use these two events as a trial case this year. After the second one is over, we would come back to you and report out as to what problems or benefits we see from that. We're also preparing a little bit of an economic study as to what these events can mean for the community or if they don't mean anything. So we're going to do a little homework over the next couple of months, but we're asking your approval of this second event out of fairness to Ms. Trammell because she was the first one to apply for an event in Zwanich Park. Whether she applied for the whole park or a partial park seems to be in a dispute, but I'm not sure it's relevant. If we can just give her the park for the day, we'll come back to you and let you know how that goes, and then we can decide what to do about these things in the future.
And when do we expect to have that review? Is that going to take place in the end of September?
I'd say September, October area, yeah. So, the first meeting in September is probably a little too close to September 1st, but the second meeting in September is probably doable.
Okay.
Commissioner Briscoe?
Well, I think everybody knows where I stand on giving our parks up for private events, close them entirely. Something I would put down on this is Ms. Trammell didn't come to light and ask for the entire park until after the other gentleman was given the park on maybe not correct circumstances. I won't go into that, but it seems to me that we just have someone jumping on board here because someone else got something. I'd like to see, what was originally asked for, and that was part of the park cordoned off. And then we've got the full park closure and the partial park closure, and we'll have a very good eye on which one works best for the public and the port. I am not going to be in favor of giving exclusive use of the park to Ms. Trammell, and for that reason that, I believe that, we're doing this, we're going to test it. Well, here's a good chance to test a partial that was, pretty much agreed to beforehand, before the other vote was taken for the other person to have the entire thing. So I think that we should, I feel we should stand with the partial closure of the park and see how both things work. If we're going to do a test, let's do it correctly. If you do give them both the whole park, then we don't really know what a partial closure works or doesn't work.
You done?
Yep, that's where I stand.
Okay, and I come at this from the complete opposite standpoint, so good luck. Shall we take a vote?
I haven't heard from Commissioner Shepard.
I don't have any questions on this. I've definitely heard from both sides on this issue. My opinion has been consistent all along that I think this is a great use for our parks, and I'm really excited to have these type of events happen. I think there's positive economic opportunity to be had, and I look forward to hopefully attending.
And if our comments are going to direct how this is negotiated, maybe I should just weigh in and say I think this is going to create a tremendous amount of excitement down here. Anything that will drive people into this area to see what we have to offer at the port I think is a great boost. I think we're going to have increased business with food trucks, we'll find increased visitorship with our restaurants and our coffee shops and our local retailers. So I see nothing but benefit from doing this in whatever fashion she sees fit. I will say that it should be driven by what her needs are and proof that she can actually pull off what she says she's going to pull off, and I think you're a good judge of that. So with that, I'm in agreement with this. So
A motion to authorize the executive director to enter into an agreement with event organizer Sherry Ann Trammell for the exclusive use of the Zwanich Point Park for a private event to be held on one day only, Saturday, September 1, 2018.
Commissioner Briscoe?
No.
Commissioner Shepard?
Yes.
Mr. Bell is yes. Okay, moving on to action item number 5.
A motion to rescind Resolutions 477, 622, 638, 764, and 916.
Before we do that, what resolution number are we on now?
5.
No, if I was to give you a new item today,
Probably 1376.
so just to show you the age of these.
Yeah.
All I
Good
had to do was look at who signed it. Peter Zuwanich back in 1976. I was in high school.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Elizabeth Monahan, Director of Human Resources. This is a rather odd motion in front of you, I grant it. But what happened is we have a very old employee handbook. And I have been working a long time on this as I can squeeze it into other projects and finally have it to a point where Rob's ready to sign all of these new policies. And by going through these policies, I found some of our policies are in conflict with old resolutions. And so I talked with Rich Davis to get some legal counsel, and he helped through the whole employee handbook process anyway, and we came up with this resolution for you to rescind these. But so these are the resolutions, and you can see the very first one, number 477, was actually written in 1964. And we couldn't find the initial resolution, the original. All we have are minutes from when it was approved, but it establishes a vacation and sick leave plan, which I'm sure is long outdated by now. We have another one from 1976 that adds a floating holiday. We have a resolution about hiring relatives. We have a non-discrimination policy. We have a financial reward system for employees from 1989, which I do believe would be completely improper with our auditor today because it's a bonus structure that's not supported. So laws have changed. A lot of things have happened since these resolutions were made. So this is to kind of clear the deck, I guess, on these. So Resolution 1106, and that is up to letter T. That is what is approved every January as part of the process for you to delegate your authority to the executive director. And there's 2 sections in there that really talk about this. There's one piece where in section 2 of that resolution, that if there's any portions of resolutions that could be pertaining to subjects that you've already delegated to the executive director, then they are repealed. There's also the section that talks about you're delegating the authority to the executive director to write employee policy. And so we want that to be with him and not in conflict with these old resolutions. So some of the other changes that have happened is like the vacation and sick leave and floating holidays. Those are parameters that are really governed now by a lot of our collective bargaining agreements. And of course, you approve those when we set those parameters, when we bargain new contracts. So these resolutions are so old that we've probably just forgotten that they existed. And things like our current paid time off plan, that includes vacation, half the prior sick leave, and it includes the calculation of a floating holiday in there. So those floating holiday, sick leave, vacation resolutions are very outdated. We have legislative changes that addresses how we handle domestic partners, which are not included in some of our old policies. And we just have some old language, as you can imagine. Our anti-discrimination policy talks about the physically handicapped, and that's just not what the kind of words we use anymore. We refer to those folks as disabled, so we're trying to get some current language in and get the old language out. So my recommendation is approval of the resolution so that the executive director can authorize and promulgate the employee handbook. And there are two different things in there. There's the promotional hosting policy that is always referenced back to Resolution 989C, and it will stay consistent with that. And the travel policy also will be consistent with the commission-approved travel policy that's in the 1106 as well. Questions?
So for the non-discrimination policy, can you just explain how we are covering that if this is rescinded?
It's covered in our employee handbook.
So it's something that's already covered and stated.
Yes.
We have that language. We're not doing away with having a non-discrimination policy.
Absolutely. We're just using more culturally accepted words and inclusive of more of the different categories that are protected that weren't back then.
Just wanted to make that clear.
Yes.
I have no questions. Commissioner Briscoe?
Well, first off, Elizabeth, thank you for being nautical. I like that clear the deck term. That was good. I'm impressed. I like that. And thank you for all your hard work on this. I know it takes a lot of time to rifle through all this old stuff and get things up to date. It's just it's a big job, and it takes a lot of time. And thank you for doing it. I appreciate it. And people of Whatcom County appreciate your effort in doing it. But I have no further questions.
And I appreciate the walk down memory lane with Peter Zwanich. So thank you for that. So the motion is?
A motion to rescind port resolutions 477, 622, 638, 764, and 916.
And Commissioner Shepard asked if we were going to take a break about here. Is that something you wish to do?
After this one?
I think we can actually get through all of them. Do you mind?
Doesn't matter to me. Whatever you folks would like to do.
Okay.
Yeah, let's. Oh, I'm sorry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now, was that on the break or the resolution? I forget.
That was on the resolution.
That was on the resolution.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Those of you in the back row, I see you laughing. All right. Number 6.
A motion authorizing the executive director to execute a contract with IMCO to perform the Blaine Marina cleanup actions in the amount of $1,001,703.11, plus a 15% contingency for a total authorized amount of $1,151,958.58.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Ben Howard, Environmental Project Manager for the Blaine Marina Inc. project. Today I'm presenting the action item for authorization to execute a contract with IMCO to perform the Blaine Marina cleanup action at the site. Also, a second action item is presented for authorization to execute an amendment to the professional services agreement with Landau Associates. And that's to perform the construction management support, implement the bioremediation program, monitoring and reporting. The Blaine Marina Inc. site has been identified by Ecology as a state-listed MACA cleanup site. Has undergone cleanup evaluation since 2011. The remedial investigation and feasibility study showed petroleum impacts to soil and groundwater, and there's free product underneath the above-ground storage tanks, and that's necessitating the cleanup. The Port and Ecology entered into a consent decree in Whatcom County Superior Court on June 27th. And the consent decree provides the scope of work and the schedule to complete the cleanup, and also settles liability following implementation. This figure illustrates the areas of the site where soil excavation and bioremediation will be implemented, and the green outline shows the site boundary. The cleanup action at the site includes the following components. That's removal of the above-ground storage tanks, building demolition, and disposal of hazardous substances such as asbestos, excavation of petroleum-contaminated soil and off-site disposal, and surface restoration, including backfill to existing grades. And a bioremediation program will be installed to address the residual dissolved phase groundwater contamination. And then compliance monitoring will be performed to assess the process or progress.
Ben, could you just describe how bioremediation works for everyone?
Yeah, so for this project, it'll be a series of trenches, and there'll be basically piping that goes underground, and it's perforated, and we'll be injecting a nitrate solution, and that enhances the microbes that are already in the ground that use that as an electron acceptor to degrade the petroleum. And so it occurs the first year. We're planning on 4 injections. And then the groundwater monitoring kind of progresses, or shows that over time of how well it's operating.
Do we rely completely on existing bacteria, or are we introducing new?
We're relying on existing bacteria. Yeah.
So we're essentially feeding them.
Yep, exactly.
Making them extra happy so they breed wildly and eat their heart's content of petroleum.
Yep.
Giant Pac-Man.
I love that description. I've never heard remediation described in such happy terms. Great.
Right, so we received 5 responsive bids, and 3 of the 5 bids had costs within less than 1%. So we got a really good bids from contractors. And IMCO was the lowest responsive bidder. The bid total was $1,001,703.11, and the engineer's estimate was $957,000. So it was within 5%. So we had a really good estimate. Then Ecology MACA grant covers 50% of the eligible costs. So pending authorization from the commission, the next steps in the process is to execute the contract with IMCO for the cleanup action. And construction is scheduled for late July through October 2018. So it's planned to start happening really fast. And then we'll execute an amendment to the professional services agreement with Landau Associates, and that's for construction management support. And they'll be operating and maintaining the bioremediation program. So they'll be the ones going out in the field and doing the bioremediation. And then monitoring and reporting. So thank you. I'd be happy to address any questions that you have.
Commissioner Shepard?
Are all of, so did our specifications around the bioremediation system, were they all, I'm sure we had some specifications that everyone was bidding to, because I see everywhere from 35,000 to 8,000 for the installation costs on that. Are we getting something better? Are we getting just the different bids for the same type of piping? Or is there anything substantially different about what these firms would do?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what their thought process would be for that. I think it's relatively simple installation as far as materials and time. Maybe it has to do with equipment they have on hand to be able to go out and do the trenching itself and just available labor. But
all right, that's it.
Commissioner Briscoe?
A couple questions, Ben. Thanks for the break or preview of the thing there. When they put this bioremediation system in, are these pipes going to be flush that you're going to enter the stuff back into the ground with? And who's going to determine the location of where those go?
I'm sorry, what was the first question?
Well, you have to put your packman or so what to speak in there to help the stuff grow every year. You said correct? Stuff has to be an additive put in.
Yeah,
Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, the first year we're planning on 4 injections, and
Okay.
and the consultant will help us in going out and doing that, and over time we'll monitor the progress with groundwater sampling. And so after every injection, we go out and monitor the groundwater to see what concentrations are at.
Okay. My question is where are you going to inject this stuff at? Are these pipes going to be sticking up out of the ground, or are they going to be flush capped? We want to make sure that when they put this stuff in, it's somewhere where we're not going to have a road with semis on it, or we're not going to have a building built over it. So where are they going to put how do they inject it into the ground?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, and I've been working a lot with real estate to, for future use of this area. And all the infiltration trenches will be all underground, and they'll be flush mount for the injections.
Okay, and then so they're injected in several different areas?
Yeah, I think there's 5 trench locations right now.
Okay. When you folks come up with that location for those caps, I would certainly like to see it.
Yeah, they are on the bid drawings. So we can
the location of them on the ground is already on the bid drawings?
Yeah.
Commissioner, we can get those to you.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. Now I forgot the other question, but that's okay. It'll come to me later. That's all. Thank you.
And for my portion of this, I'm going to seek guidance from our attorney, and also let you gentlemen know that this is my business. I'm in the petroleum contaminated soil cleanup business, and I market this, my technology, to companies everywhere. And I have marketed to IMCO, so they're aware of my technology. And it's not currently proposed for this, but for that reason, I would like to ask to recuse myself and ask the attorney to render an opinion on that recusal.
So here again, Commissioner, there is no legal obligation to recuse yourself because you're not beneficially interested either directly or indirectly in this contract. So you have the legal right to vote. Then it becomes a matter of your judgment as to what's best for the port and best for the community. So you can just abstain from voting if you feel that's appropriate. Not legally required, though.
And for this, just because I am so familiar with IMCO and their ownership and am working closely with them on a couple of other projects, I do think I will recuse myself from this and move this forward with my abstention. So, gentlemen, if you care to vote.
Mr. Bell, I do have one question. I remembered what it was.
Me too. Go ahead, Bobby.
I see we got a 15% contingency on this. Aren't we usually at 10? Why are we at 15?
I guess a 15% contingency is kind of based on the soil excavation and disposal. Right now, it is a really defined area where the excavation is happening. But when you go into the field and begin the excavation, the main objective of the excavation is really to get the free product of the oil that's in the ground. And so if we do encounter more in the field, there's allowance to excavate more material.
And let me speak to that a little bit, Bobby. When you go into these things and you start digging, you get runners. You can't possibly sample the entire area, and there are going to be areas where there are veins that may or may not have oil escape into them, and you can't plan for that because your grid can't get small enough to capture absolutely every possibility. Actually, 15% is low for a typical remediation project of this kind, just because as soon as you start digging, you're going to find a little bit more than you typically would find, especially with oil. Some commodities aren't as apt to run, but oil is one of those that tends to find any hole it can creep into, and it will run. So it's not uncommon.
Okay, thanks.
Does this pipe stay in the ground forever? And how long are we expecting to be feeding and making our bacteria so happy?
This is the bioremediation piping. No, it'll be, at the end of its life, it will be removed from the ground. And right now, the preliminary estimates are till 2022, so our 4-year period where we'll meet our cleanup levels.
So we're going to put this stuff in and then tear it back out?
Upon successful completion of the remediation, yes.
Why would we take it back out? Why would we not just cap it off and leave it there?
That is a good option, and I suppose we can evaluate that at that time.
Yeah, well, it doesn't make much sense to me to spend a bunch of money to tear up blacktop and everything else that's going on around there. If this is a fairly big area, this piping is going to go under, right?
And none of the costs here are covering the removal, are they? That would be a separate proposal for us.
Yeah. That's correct, Commissioner. That'd be a separate project that would come to the Commission in 2022 to remove those pipes. So
Yes,
probably a decision could be made at that time.
Or possibly combined with other kind of uses at the time.
Are we required to remove those pipes?
Oh, we're not required to, no.
And what will the pipes be made of, plastic or metal or?
Yeah, generally PVC. We are getting a license with the state for an injection permit, so we can do the injection. So we would have to do a process with the state to decommission them.
Okay, but we're not really required to take them out of the ground.
Yeah.
And this contract isn't taking them out of the ground or any action on the back end.
No, I know. I'm just thinking ahead here. Okay, thanks.
And I'd like to put both your minds at ease. This is a perfect environment for bio. There are some places that are not suited for bioremediation, but we have the perfect climate and the perfect environment for that type of remediation to occur. So I expect this bioremediation to be very successful in capturing anything that the actual remediation doesn't capture. So with that?
A motion authorizing the executive director to execute a contract with IMCO to perform the Blaine Marina, Inc. Cleanup actions in the amount of $1,001,703.11, plus a 15% contingency for a total authorized amount of $1,151,958.58.
Commissioner Briscoe?
Aye.
Commissioner Shepard?
Aye.
Commissioner Bell abstains. Okay, we now take a break.
Yeah, I was going to say we have one person signed up to comment for the 5:30 comment period.
Oh, sorry, and action item number 7.2 was along with this presentation for the PSA amendment.
Okay, I think we probably honor the 5:30 comment period and come back to 7 if that's all right.
Sure. No, we want to get rid of you. Now, let's go ahead and do the 5:30. We'll honor that time frame, so we can go to our 5:30 comment period. Commissioner Briscoe, is that okay with you?
Fine with me.
Okay, for the 5:30 comment. Eddie?
Well, good afternoon. My name's Eddie Uri. I'm a Clean Energy Program Manager at Resources for Sustainable Communities, local nonprofit, education and advocacy. I'm here to talk about the waterfront. As you might expect, seems like a pattern where I'm the sole public speaker at these things for the last few. Maybe that's going to continue for a while. And at the last meeting, I brought up that a number of different groups in the community were interested in seeing a greater level of review for the sub-area plan. And though we were happy with some of the outreach that was done in the early part of this year before the amendments or the application to amend the plan was sent to the city, it basically came down to, do you like plan A or do you like plan B that is almost the same plan when it comes to the street layout? And I think a lot of folks were looking for a little bit further level of engagement, given that it's been 5 years since the plan was adopted. A lot's changed in 5 years. If you could even imagine trying to picture what 2018 would have been like in 2013, I don't think any of us would have. And it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to really go some steps further, fix some things, maybe compromises that were made 5 years ago, and but really take a forward-looking lens. Because when I see the waterfront, I see the future. I know it may take decades for all that space to really get filled and developed, but what gets built there is going to shape the rest of the city. It's building out the heart of the city and shaping it for the next century to come. And I plan to be walking those streets in the 2050s, 2060s. And I like to imagine what that might be like. And I'm concerned that, if we settle now, that we're going to end up with something that's maybe not the best that we could have gotten for where we are right now in history. So, one of the areas I brought up in particular we're interested in is higher standards for sustainable building design. What the development regulations now are pretty weak. They can, a developer can comply with them by using new appliances, Energy Star appliances, and having some motion center light switches in parts of the building, and then that meets the standards for green building. But in 2018, we actually have lots of innovation in green building. People are building net zero. They're building super water efficient buildings, and there's all kinds of there are codes that are being done in other places that we can look to as examples and see that development can really happen with that. And given that this is public property, why should we settle for less before we sell it off and give it away? So I think there's a lot of potential there. I know that the city is interested in this. At last night's city council meeting, council members spoke in favor of a greater level of review going through their process and working with the city planning commission, not just for the sub-area plan, but for some of the concurrent review of documents like the development agreement. And so, of course, given the interlocal, the need for agreement between the port and the city and all these decisions, I'm just hoping to, just on my end, do what we can to help facilitate a good dialogue and productive conversation where information can be brought to both parties. Everyone get educated about what possibilities are for if we're going to go into changing the plan or development regs in any way. And I know other folks may want to go further into other areas even than what we've proposed. So I'm hoping that, coming up here, we can get something on the calendar to have a joint public meeting with both city and port officials in the same room and start talking about it. And it's going to be, this may take a while to get going. Right now, last night they just approved it for docketing, so we got plenty of time. But I guess right now I'm just playing messenger between the city and the port meetings to come back and forth between y'all. And, but hopefully, I've heard that there's been direct dialogue going as well. So maybe in the new business portion of the meeting, we can have a little discussion about that. Or otherwise we can follow up later. So thanks for hearing me out.
Thanks, Eddie. Anyone else wishing to speak at public? With that, we'll close that and move to action item number 7, unless somebody needs a break. Bobby, you doing okay?
I'm good.
All right, let's do it.
A motion authorizing the executive director to execute an amendment to the professional services agreement with Landau Associates, adding $387,400 for a total revised budget of $1,449,940, including contingency, to perform construction management support and reporting for the Blaine Marina, Inc. cleanup action.
Yeah, this action item is, as Diane said, for Landau Associates to execute the amendment to do the construction management support, operation and maintenance of the bioremediation program, monitoring and reporting for the Blaine Marina cleanup project.
So this is linked to the last item. You got a long explanation on the last item. This is just the management of that contract by Landauer, who manages a number of our environmental projects.
Just remind me what else Landau is doing on site at Blaine as part of the larger cleanup.
As part of this contract for this?
No, I understand what they're doing for this part, but what else are they doing already?
So Landau has been involved since 2012 or so when the remedial investigation and feasibility study started. So they've gone through the remedial investigation. We did an interim action. We did a bulkhead improvement for some of the petroleum there on the shoreline, and the feasibility study and cleanup action plan. So they've kind of been through the whole cleanup process.
Great. So they've got a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge and background on this particular site and its needs.
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Briscoe? Hello.
Sorry, I was taking a drink of water there. I put it on mute. No questions.
I asked you if you needed a break.
No, I didn't need a break. I just muted you.
I have no questions.
A motion authorizing the executive director to execute an amendment to the professional services agreement with Landau Associates, adding $387,400 for a total revised budget of $1,449,940, including contingency to perform construction management support and reporting for the Blaine Marina, Inc. site cleanup action.
Commissioner Briscoe?
Aye.
Shepherd?
Aye.
And because this is close enough to smell bad, I'm going to recuse myself from this and abstain.
I'm confused on that one.
Because he recused himself for the IMCO, which is related to this contract, he's recusing himself for this one as well. It was an overabundance of caution.
Very good. Got it.
No legal basis, but certainly
He's on safety. He's on safety reserve.
What you just said, sure.
A motion to authorize the executive director to execute a contract with Summit Construction of Bellingham, Washington for the C Street Terminal Project Phase 2 in the amount of $508,520.34, plus a 10% contingency for a total authorized contract amount of $559,372.26.
Good evening, Commissioners. Greg Nickel, Project Engineer. This project is the second phase of a multi-phase project to clean up and redevelop the C Street terminal site. The first phase of work was completed in 2016 and focused primarily on the right-of-way. That included construction of a new concrete roadway between Chestnut and Maple. It also constructed new stormwater treatment facilities and undergrounded all the above-ground power on the site. It also constructed a water line on behalf of the city. This current phase of work is an interim project that's intended to provide new power and water service to the property, as well as to ensure compliance with stormwater regulations. There are future scopes of work that will include excavation of contaminated soil, some additional site grading, installation of additional stormwater improvements, and capping of the site. This current scope of work, as I said, is an interim action to ensure compliance with stormwater regulations, which means that we need to contain and isolate the stormwater from the site to prevent runoff into the bay. To accomplish that, we're going to do some minor site grading on the northwest and northeast corners of the site, and we will install what will ultimately be a temporary stormwater pump station and force main that will pump the stormwater that does not infiltrate on the site to the ASB lagoon for evaporation. We'll also be providing new power service and water service to the site from the 10-inch water main in C Street and from the transformer that was installed as part of the first phase of work. Those services will serve 3 power and water pedestals that will be installed along the bulkhead to provide shore power to vessels moored in the Whatcom waterway. One thing to note is that the westernmost pedestal is going to actually be temporarily installed approximately 60 feet east of the original design location. And the reason for that is that there is an area of contaminated soils that there's plans to do an excavation in the near future. And so we're going to temporarily locate that westernmost pedestal further to the east. And then once that cleanup is completed, we'll relocate that into its final location. For this project, we received 3 responsive bids. The bids ranged from $508,000 to $758,000. And the lowest responsible bidder was Summit Construction of Bellingham. The schedule for this project, we're currently waiting for issuance of the shoreline permit from the city, and we're anticipating that to be issued on August 1st, at which point we'll issue notice to proceed to the contractor. We're anticipating a construction period from August through October of this year. The on-site work is not anticipated to take that long, but we do have a number of long lead time items on this contract, and so we've included a fairly lengthy contract period to accommodate that. And we anticipate completing the project in late October of this year. As I mentioned, Summit Construction is a responsive bidder, and we are recommending award of the contract to them. Any questions?
So this is farther along. I thought this was on the next agenda, so I screwed up here in an earlier conversation with Commissioner Shepard. My apologies. I thought this was in August for some reason. Is Summit Construction David Ebenall?
Yes, it is.
Thanks.
My sentiment exactly. Commissioner Briscoe. Commissioner Shepard. 3 hmms.
How time sensitive is approval of this for getting started?
The primary time sensitivity of this is to avoid constructing during the winter. And so in order to avoid that, we've tried to get this approved this commission meeting. That's the only real urgency to this project. The one other urgent thing is that in order to maintain compliance with stormwater regulations when the rainy season does return, we will put back in place a rental diesel-powered pump to pump any stormwater that we collect in the existing catch basin over to the ASB lagoon, which is what we did this last winter.
And are you able to I I have I may ask for a delay on this, and so I'm going to want to confer if this is possible. I feel I owe a little bit of further conversation with some of my partners in labor unions before I move forward on this, just to make sure that this is something I'm comfortable with.
Okay.
I wasn't quite versed on every detail of this proposal. So maybe first you could describe why we're seeing such a range in the pricing on this bid, if you have any estimates for me there.
Quite honestly, I'm not totally certain why. I did notice that Summit's bid for electrical, which is probably about 2/3 of or about 1/3 of the project, was quite low. They have indicated that they have their own crews to do that work, and that may explain some of that low cost, but I can't explain that entirely.
Okay.
The electrical looks like it's about 80,000 below the second bidder. So that's a majority of it.
I have a couple questions for you. Number one is, we can do this in the winter, correct? There's nothing that says we can't do it in the winter.
That's correct.
Okay, the second thing would be is how much work are we going to disrupt by doing it this time of the year? It seems to me that we have a lot of, Colony Wharf, our terminal there is probably going to be fairly busy. And we're going to do this in the middle of the busy time of the year, which makes absolutely no sense to me if we don't have to do it then. And thirdly, I would concur with Commissioner Shepard. I'd like to put this off until the August meeting, at least.
Okay.
Commissioners, one of the options that's in front of you is to vote no on this and ask the port to take this out for a rebid sometime in the future. Is that correct, Counselor?
I'm assuming, I see Mr. Fulton coming up, that you put this out for bid, probably without supplemental bidder responsibility criteria, correct?
Correct.
So you are obligated to do one of three things. You certainly can delay it. You can award it to the lowest responsible bidder. Responsive means they filled the bid forms out correctly. Responsible means they met the criteria in the statute. If you do that, they'll proceed, and it's a prevailing wage job, so they'll pay the prevailing wage. Your third option is to reject all bids. You always have that right. I guess that's two options. The third option is to delay it and think about it, although it depends on, that is going to depend on how long these prices are good for. In other words, the bid opening typically says we'll hold our prices for 30 days. So I don't know when the bid was open and when 30 days hits. Did I miss anything, Mr. Fulton?
Thank you, Mr. Schmelk. Adam Fulton, Director of Facilities. Essentially, to delay this project is to cancel the project until we rebid it. The bid will expire, given that we have a 6-week break in our commission meeting till August 21st. So it's the commission's prerogative to simply reject the bid, and we would. I honestly, the Commissioner Briscoe is correct. We can do the work anytime. It's not ideal to do this much earthwork in the rainy season. It also introduces some stormwater issues for us. At the same time, I can tell you having a 50% swing from the high to the low is alarming, and I wouldn't mind climbing into those plans and specs again to see why there's such discrepancy in the bid, and that may pay dividends or at least get us less risk in a tighter bid. So I'll leave it to the Commission's discretion. However, delaying is really not an option. It's either to go forward or to cancel.
And I would tell the commission that apparently the bidders, this bidder is the lowest responsible bidder, so it's really not up for the commission to second guess that aspect of the transaction, because that's governed by statute. However, it is within the sound discretion of the commission to say, gosh, we're 508 to 758. We got a big swing here. We're not sure. Your director of facilities has said maybe we can dig into the plans and specs in a little more detail. And on those bases, you have some discretion to reject all bids and to rebid the project.
My question is, given this bidder, this bid, this spec, that that differential. I mean, essentially, it's a third of the cost of the other. Are you comfortable?
Let me just say, the one thing is, Commissioners, it's really not about this bidder. It's about the differential and the project.
Are you comfortable with that kind of a differential given, and especially the electrical being done in-house versus?
Commissioner, not exactly. 50% is a very large swing. However, our bid process, our plans and specs development, and do we have a responsible bidder with the lowest responsive bid? We do. One thing that commissioners might consider is just why is the swing so wild? The market is so hot right now. There's hunger and there's feast, and so in that time, it's very difficult to estimate. Some people have staffed up tremendously because the market is so hot, and all of a sudden they're done with their work and they've got a bunch of staff, and so they're a little more competitive. There's several reasons we could point to the swing. That said, if it's the Port of Adam, I would probably I would not mind going back to understanding why there is such a swing, and potentially tightening that up. So.
Point out there's a Port of Allen in Washington, but no Port of Adam.
I like that, Adam. That was good. Very good.
My point, commissioners, is that our process is standard, is legal, and is forthright. That said, as a competitive engineer that wants to understand exactly why the prices are the way they are, I would understand if the commission elected to ask us to rebid the project and potentially change the project to understand it better. So.
I'd like to get on with things here. I think we need to rebid this project. My opinion is we need to rebid this project. I'm not comfortable looking at the stretch here between the two. I don't understand why that is, and I'd like to know why that is. The other thing, a question I have for Adam is, were the guys that they're going to use the C Street terminal, were they brought in on the design of this thing? Did they have input on this, Adam?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Were the people who used the barge terminal, the C Street area, were they brought in at the time of the design on placement of things, placement of power, placement of water? Were they in on this? Were they there locally?
Yes, we met with them 2, possibly 3 times, went over both the 30% and the 90%, and I believe that we also met with them on 100% design. So they've been involved throughout this design process.
Very good, thank you. That's all the questions. That's all I have to say.
And I agree with Commissioner Briscoe. I'm not comfortable voting on today.
I'm also looking at the second place bidder, and that was also about 130,000 more. So the swing, the 3 bids are completely incongruous. If we had you look at the specifics of this, could we bring it back in 2 weeks and have you?
You don't meet again until August 21st or 20, I think something, 21. Yep. Sorry.
Reality, it hits me a lot.
Well, there's nothing that says we can't call a special meeting.
True.
If folks, staff, and my fellow commissioners and our director felt there's a special meeting necessary, there's nothing that says we can't call that meeting.
No, and I'm torn here because I trust the staff and their oversight on any of these items that go forward. And so with that being said, I'm inclined to want to lean towards whatever your recommendation is from a staff standpoint. Port of Adam.
Well, we need to vote.
It's a very competitive price with a very proven contractor. At the same time, I am equally as uncomfortable with the spread. My movement from here forward, should the commission decide to reject the bids, would be to interview these contractors to understand what they were seeing that was so incongruous with each other, And that's very typical and very standard to have such conversations. They don't yield a benefit to anybody, but they do educate us. And that might lead us to change our plans and understand where we've accidentally inserted risk into the equation. Essentially, we do our best to lower risk because risk is cost. So in this case, I do feel like there must be some risk in there that these bids are this far apart. And,
Well, I would also say maybe there was some ambiguity in one of the specs, specifically in the electrical, where we would see a change order coming our way because it wasn't specified in the spec, and I would like to know that.
I totally agree.
So what the heck do we do?
So you can either
We
take
need to
act-
vote.
Well,
You
don't have to
Commissioner,
vote.
what you can do is, what you should do, in my recommendation, is first vote on this motion, which if you vote no on awarding this contract to this bidder, then the next motion is to, well, let me back up. Table this motion, and if you ever mind, one of the commissioners makes a motion to reject all bids on this project, you take that up, and then you vote on that, and all the bids are rejected, and you never vote on this motion because you rejected all bids, within your complete discretion.
At that point, we also have the ability to say, bring these bids back, or is that?
Once you reject the bids, the next time you'll see it is on a rebid scenario. You could table this and call a special meeting, and that's the other alternative, and have staff come back and make a further recommendation. I would suggest you defer to your staff on that.
And talk to me about the need to have this project done in a timely fashion.
Can I interject just before you get that question answered? Has the terminal people been talked to about what is the best time to do this for them, for their business?
We did discuss the timing of this, and we were very careful about the way that we wrote our contract to ensure that the needs of the terminal users trumped the needs of the contractor. We also limited the time that they could have their trench open and the time that they could be limiting access across the site. A majority of the trenching for this project is along the bulkhead. There is one trench that goes across the Maple Street bulkhead that we do have to be very careful with, and we were very careful about our wording in the contract to make sure that the tenant had all the access that they needed for that site.
And they were comfortable with the time frame, or was there a better time frame that they brought forward?
They didn't mention a better time. They did indicate that they were busy. So no, they didn't identify another time, but they did make it clear that they were busy and they needed to be accommodated.
Right. It seems to me that this is a very poor time to do this project. I know that there's complications in the wintertime because of the wetness and so on and so forth, but to chew up that piece of ground in our barge terminal this time of the year, that particular time of the year, seems not very good to me, not very smart at all. I think that we need to look at doing it at the off season instead of the on season for those folks. I mean, everybody's going to do the best they can, but they were greatly inhibited a couple of years ago, and we tore that place up. I don't think we should do that again. I think we should figure out a way to accommodate their business at the peak time, which we're right in the middle of it. So,
Commissioner Briscoe, I'd like to move this forward. Would you mind making a motion?
First, you have to table the current motion.
So,
Table it or reject it, correct?
I would table it and then make the other motion.
I make a motion we table this action item.
Is there a second?
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then there's a new motion?
Is there a new motion?
I make a motion that we I forgot what it was.
Reject all
Help me
bids.
out. Yeah, reject all bids.
Is there a second?
Second.
That's a hard one for me. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Sorry, Port of Adam. Anything else you'd like to, any other action you'd like to take on this? Okay. Action item number 9.
This is a motion in 2 parts. Part A, a motion to approve a renewal and modification of lease between the Port of Bellingham and Norman M. Walsh, doing business as Walsh Marine for premises at the Blaine Marine Industrial Area. And Part B, a motion by the Port Commission to increase the Capital Improvement Program, or CIP, budget 107-787 from $140,000 to $543,700 for construction of a new building at the Walsh Marine leasehold site.
That was a mouthful.
Thank you, Diane. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Brady Scott, Real Estate Representative with the Port of Bellingham. In 2011, Walsh Marine entered into a month-to-month lease to operate the boatyard in the Blaine Marine Industrial Area. Soon thereafter, the lease was converted to a 2-year term, and then it's been renewed 3 additional 2-year periods, and now extends through March 2019 for a total of 8 years. Excuse me. In around 2016, Walsh Marine began talking with port staff about their need of a building for use as a tool shed and storage building. The port approved a 2018 capital budget item of $140,000 to construct a simple 1,250 square foot prefab building on their leasehold. Port staff are now proposing an increased scope for the building. Instead of the 1,250 square foot prefab building, we are proposing to construct a 2,240 square foot partially insulated design engineered building that includes a small office, bathroom, lunchroom, tool room with a large open bay and shop space. The reason for this proposed increase in scope is threefold. First, given the relocation of Web House 1 to the other side of the marina, the new larger building will help to replace Walsh Marine's current use of 2 web lockers, which they rent adjacent to their leasehold. Second, the building will replace some of the functionality of the tent structure on site. The tent, which was installed by the previous tenant, has been difficult to maintain given its design, height, and exposure to wind and weather. And then in spring 2017, the fabric roof was irreparably damaged by a storm and therefore is slated for removal from the site. Walsh Marine had used that structure for various boat operations, some of which are better suited inside a permanent building. And then 3, the new building will be a long-term replacement for the portable office trailer currently used by Walsh Marine. Given these reasons and based on further discussions with the tenant, Walsh Marine, it has become apparent that a larger building with an efficient layout and more amenities is desirable for the long-term success of a boatyard in Blaine. Based on this, there are 2 motions for your consideration. First is a renewal and modification of the Walsh Marine lease. So this would provide for a new lease term beginning August 1st, 2018 for an initial 5-year term with 7 5-year renewal options for a total 40-year term, which would provide the long-term boatyard lease for the Blaine Marine Industrial Area. The renewal and modification of lease also would provide for the port to remove the tent from the leasehold premises and to construct this new building facility, and then for Walsh Marine to pay for the new building through an increase in rent based upon the project cost, amortized at 4% over 40 years. In addition, the renewal and modification updates other sections of the lease so that it conforms to a long-term lease. Also for your consideration is a motion to increase the capital budget for the Walsh Marine building from $140,000 to $543,700. The actual estimated cost ranges from $396,000 to the $543,700. And the port intends to explore the possibility of a Whatcom Economic Development Improvement Grant or loan to further offset the cost of the building. And with that, port staff recommends commission approval. Thank you.
My question is around the EDI fund ask. Are we putting ourselves in a disadvantaged position to ask for EDI funds if we've already approved this up to a maximum threshold?
Technically, probably yes, but I don't, it's such a great project in an area of the county that could use that project. I don't see the EDI board balking at it. I could be wrong. But yeah, I think if it was a questionable project, you'd be better off not approving it, because then the EDI board would look at you like, why would we fund a questionable project when you've already approved it? But this one is such an overwhelming case for the jobs down there and what it does for the economic impact in Blaine that I see it being a no-brainer for the EDI board.
And do we need to sequence it? Is there a better rationale to go to EDI first, or do you just think you've already explained that you don't think it's needed.
Yeah.
But is there a reason that we're voting on it before going to EDI?
Shirley or Brady, I don't know what the conversations have been with Walsh. I don't know what the construction timeline would be. I'm unsure that if we were to put this off for a month, what that would mean.
Yeah, we do want to move forward quickly, given the time frame of various projects, like the demolition of the web locker and time frame. So and there's a permitting process with the shoreline permits. So there is some timing elements to getting it constructed. At the beginning, ending construction at the beginning of next year.
Don, have you put any feelers out to the board on this?
Commissioner Briscoe?
Yeah, this project needs to be done whether the EDI helps or not. It's irrelevant, really. I hope they do. I hope they see their way clear to do it, because Blaine deserves a little bit of the EDI funding. I don't believe they've, and correct me if I'm wrong, Executive Director Fix, I don't think Blaine has received any help from EDI. And I think this is, as you said, a no-brainer. I mean, it's going to help the economic development in Blaine. It's going to bring jobs. It's going to bring more boats, which is going to be supplies and stuff bought uptown, people staying overnight, groceries, so on and so forth. So I think that if we sit on this and don't act on it, you're pushing the project out that much further. We've got a gentleman there that works his butt off to keep a yard going that the port took apart several years ago. And I think we need to put it back together, and I would hate to see us delay on this whatsoever.
So, and to answer your question, I don't recall any EDI funds being awarded to Blaine. That doesn't mean there hasn't been, but I don't recall any in the 10 years I've been here.
Great. I'm going to echo your sentiment, Commissioner Briscoe, that this needs to be done. EDI be damned. But I do think we should move forward with the EDI request, but it needs to be done, so I'm in favor.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with moving forward with the EDI request, and I think it's going to be irrelevant whether we move forward or not. If we move forward, it just strengthens the fact that there's something correct that needs to be done.
Great. Okay.
And
Thank you.
with that, English lessons are scheduled for later.
That's all, folks.
A motion to approve a renewal and modification of lease between the Port of Bellingham and Norman M. Walsh doing business as Walsh Marine for premises at the Blaine Marine Industrial Area. And Part B, a motion to increase the capital improvement program or CIP budget 107-787 from $140,000 to $543,700 for construction of a new building at the Walsh Marine leasehold site.
Commissioner Briscoe?
Aye.
Commissioner Shepard?
Aye.
And Commissioner Bell is also thank you.
I would like to point something out about the change in cost of the building. That first cost that was thrown out was just a ballpark guess by staff and ourselves. We never really looked into it, and that's how come there was such a big discrepancy. We didn't think things would cost that much, and they did, and we were just guessing with that first number.
With the action items for today, and Commissioners, do you have any, Commissioner Briscoe, any other business?
No, I spoke about my great faith in our staff and what a darn good job they've been doing and over the year so far, and that was all I had to bring for things to say today.
Commissioner Shepard.
For Eddie, for your comments, I'm happy to take some lead on making sure we're communicating those public process opportunities both at the city council level and at the planning commission level, because this is going to go through both of those bodies, and there will be opportunities for the public to weigh in a number of times over the next 9 months or so while this is working through the city's process. It will again come back to the port afterwards, and I'm also happy to do some interfacing between our counterparts at the city council level and take their temperature on where they'd like to, if they're interested in any further consultations or meetings. So thank you for bringing that up, and I appreciate your work on it.
And I have no other business for myself. With that, meeting adjourned.